wasn't on my side. I truly felt like God wasn't interested in me or my life, and I constantly struggled with the idea that God just didn't love me. Hi guys, my name is Donna, and welcome to the Rock and Honey Collective podcast. I am so excited that you guys are here. This is our very first season of filming the Rock and Honey Collective podcast series. And I'm turning this into a podcast because I think that it's going to benefit you, the viewer, the listener, a lot more than just doing individual videos. So I decided that we are going to do a whole series this season. And the name of this series is going to be Unexpectedly Out of Faith. And that is named after my book that I just wrote, Unexpectedly Out of Faith. If you are interested, I will leave a link to that book down below. And it is really something that came to fruition after I was unexpectedly unemployed. And so I decided to create the Rock and Honey Collective, and it's a platform, faith-based, that encourages, life experiences through faith in Jesus and what my testimony looks like. And so I'm so excited to share that with you guys this season. And so welcome and thank you for watching. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get alerts every time I make a new video. So the first episode, we're really going to dive into my faith walk. And the reason why I wanted to start this series with this particular topic is because I think it really registers a lot with people who may be in the same situation that I am in. Someone who may have felt like there was no purpose for them, or they couldn't find a relationship with God. And that is exactly where I was and where I saw myself for the majority of my life. I truly felt as if God wasn't on my side. I truly felt like God wasn't interested in me or my life. And I constantly struggled with the idea that God just didn't love me. And so if you're feeling that way, if you feel like God isn't listening, or he's listening to so many other people, but he's just not listening to you, or maybe you are disconnected completely from God. There are so many different situations that people might be in that might put them in a separation relationship with Jesus. And so that's really where I was for the majority of my life. Until I came to my faith, until I began walking with God. And I want to go into that and what my experiences with God on my faith and how I became a believer in this series. And so I really encourage you guys, if this is a topic, if this is, something that you are going through where you just feel like God just isn't listening. Maybe he listens to everyone else, but he's just not there for me, then this is the series for you. This is the channel for you. So the topic of this very first episode is going to be my testimony and why I drifted, or how I just came to, be separated by God, and a little bit about my background. So I am Catholic, Roman Catholic, Italian, brought up in Brooklyn. I currently moved out of Brooklyn since. But, I did what every good Catholic girl did. You listen to your parents, you go to church, you do all your sacraments. But I didn't know why. I didn't understand the whole point of why I was doing this. And my mom and my dad weren't very religious people. We did go to church, and we had like a ritual. We would go to church on Sunday. I also did catechism. So, I did all my sacraments, made my communion, got baptized, made my confirmation later on in life. Like not too much later, like when I was 16, I made my confirmation on my own. But like my parents weren't religious, so to speak, where, they prayed, or, we went to church on Sunday and that was it. That was the end of it. I was that Italian, girl whose grandma had the picture of the Saint Teresa in her bedroom, the one that everybody has holding the flowers behind the couch or in the bedroom. And, it was always kind of like eerie to me, because I would go into my grandma's bedroom and I would look and I would swear that the Saint Teresa was following me everywhere I went. And so, I just didn't feel, connected. And you go to church and, and then we would go home. Our ritual would be like, we would go to church and then we would go to McDonald's afterwards. And my dad, would go to odd masses. My dad would go to like Greek masses and Chinese masses, and he would go to we would go to synagogue often, but like, so he would drag me to these masses, we would go to church, and then he would fall asleep. And I was absolutely bored out of my mind. I didn't understand a word of what was going on. Obviously, I'm a young girl, and here I am. My father is literally passed out, snoring in the pew in a Greek mass. And so, I just didn't feel like interested. And our landlord was actually Jewish, and on like high holy days, my family would actually go with my landlord. There was a synagogue down the block and we would go, and it was interesting. They blow the horn, and I felt very spiritually moved even at a young age and interested at synagogue. But and during the holidays we would spend with them. During Passover sometimes we would go and have dinner with them, Shabbat with them, but nothing out of the ordinary. And that was it. My parents had a cross above their bed, but it wasn't something that was practiced or spoke about in my home. And now I believe that maybe my dad was really trying to search for his place with his own religion. My dad maybe was trying to find, peace in his own life.
Have you ever felt like God just stopped listening? You watched all your friends move on, but your prayers, well, they seem to go unanswered. You feel alone, discouraged, and disappointed. So your faith, well, it just quietly disappeared. I know that feeling because I lived it for 44 years. Hi, my name is Donna, author of The Unexpectedly Out of Faith and the founder of the Rock and Honey Collective. This book will not teach you how to be perfect in your relationship with God, nor is it a self-help how-to guide. It was written with you in mind, so you can find community through my testimony. A story about my journey through doubt, disconnection, loneliness, and redemption, and how Jesus met me unexpectedly in the middle of my wilderness season. These pages were written for the person who ever felt lost in life, for the one who once believed but now isn't so sure, for the one who feels numb, forgotten, or just too far gone. If you were like me and you whispered, screamed, or even shouted through your suffering, "God, where are you?" You are not alone. This book is a reminder that even in silence, God is still moving. You are never too lost to be found, and God is working behind the scenes to prepare you for your journey. If He could save me, He could do it for you too, because He loves you. Unexpectedly Out of Faith is available now on Amazon as paperback or an ebook. And don't forget to check out my other books, Unexpectedly Out of Time and Unexpectedly Out of Office, as well as my 4-month Christian Revival Journal. Want more? Head over to www.therockandhoneycollective.com and subscribe for exclusive content, perks, new releases, and to join a growing faith-filled community. With love and faith.
But that basically was it. And so as I got older, like everyone else, as you get older and you get disappointments in life, you drift further away from God. And I was constantly disappointed, especially in my parents. And I go into that in my book, Unexpectedly Out of Faith. I talk a lot about my relationship with them and my separation with them, and how I felt like they weren't bad parents at all. And, rest their souls, both of them are since passed. But they did the best that they could, like most parents, I believe, do the best that they can, for what they have. And we don't know as their children, some of us don't have the privy to know their background or some of the demons or things that they may go through in their own lives to put them in a place that they are mentally. And so it's usually not until they pass away. Maybe we don't think to ask those questions, or maybe we ask the questions and it's too late to understand, the background of our own parents. And that really is what happened with me, because I feel like I didn't really learn who my parents were until after they passed. And then I said to myself, oh, I get it now. I get why they were the way that they were, and they weren't bad people. They come from a very old school generation. My parents had me late in life. They were 40 and 45 when they had me. I was born in 1979, so that's a little unheard of. And so when I would go to school, I would, they didn't really my mom wasn't into oh, I gotta dye my hair, and my dad wore weird hats all the time, and so they would take me to school and I would get made fun of because they would say that my parents looked like my grandparents. And so I was just so embarrassed all the time because my mom had gray hair at 45, and now I'm 45 and I am in the same boat as she is, because this hair is dyed now, but it wasn't dyed a week ago. And so you just don't realize that your parents are human too. They're people too, with feelings and emotions and dreams. And we don't even realize sometimes what those are. And so they weren't bad parents. They were battling their own demons. And I always, though, felt invisible. I felt neglected. I felt like they weren't there. At 13 years old, I decided that I was going to move out of my house. And what child is even given that opportunity or allowed to make that decision that they were going to move out? And so I didn't live by myself. I lived with another family member. Looking back, I don't know which decision was better, but it put me on the path that I obviously am on now in my life. And so, I don't know which situation was a better situation, but I think I'm a better person for it. But typically, a child shouldn't be able to make that decision at 13 that they were going to move out. And so the reason why I moved away from my parents was because they decided that at the age of 12, they were going to move out of Brooklyn, move to Pennsylvania in the shticks of, Amish Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And that just wasn't for me. I was not going to Lancaster. There was, my friends weren't there. I wasn't used to it. My parents didn't drive. So for parents to decide we're going to move to Pennsylvania and not even drive, made no sense to me. I was a lot smarter, I think, than the average child. I think a lot of kids back in the 80s are a lot smarter than kids today. But I just had this vision of what things were going to be like if I moved with them. And so I didn't want to leave my friends. I didn't want to leave New York. I decided that give me a year, right? Give me a year and let me finish school. And when school's over, I'll come and live in Pennsylvania. And so they agreed, and I stayed with a cousin, finished school, and then it was time to move back. But I didn't want to go. I set up my bedroom. I had my stuff there, and everything. And I decided, I asked my parents, I said, I don't want to come home. I don't want to move back. And I don't know if they allowed it. I really don't know, because you're so young. I don't know how that conversation went, that they just said okay, or I just didn't go back, or I know that they weren't happy about it. There was a lot of conflict between my cousin and my parents over basically ownership of who I belonged to. And I was always put in the middle between their relationship. And I was basically tug of war all the time between the two of them. And at the same time, in both scenarios, both lifestyles weren't the best for me, because both sets were not interested, I feel, in my best interest. I feel like they both had some selfish tendencies, and they really looked to satisfying their own life and what they wanted. And so, they really didn't put me first. And that's where the neglect and the loneliness really started to bubble. And so this went on, where I had no contact with my parents at all from the age of 13 to the age of 20. And that's really hard for, I think, a young girl to go through, for any child to go through, because those are the prime time of your life where you are maturing, you're growing, you're learning how to be a person through your parents' actions. And when your parents aren't the ones that are speaking into your life, who are there to show you how to be a good human being, examples are lost on, you know, influence is not there from your parents. You're being influenced by other people. And I know, it doesn't matter who raises you in a way, because sometimes you don't have that opportunity to be with parents, right? Maybe you're adopted or whatever the case is. Everybody has a different situation. But I believe that if, as long as the people who are supposed to be taking care of you are doing their job as an adult, then it really doesn't matter. And the people who were supposed to be taking care of me were not doing their job as an adult. And so I felt very left behind. And that's where I started to feel like God just didn't love me. He just, why was I going through this? Why did I feel so alone? Why did I feel like no one loved me? That there was no, like, why was I here? Why was there no purpose for me? And so, I really truly felt that God didn't care about me. And the more I was disappointed by the people in my life, the more that I, had to live solidarity on my own and take care of myself, grow up quicker than probably I should have. I just felt totally separated by God. And when when I used to say that when God wanted to laugh, he just turned my channel on, because that's where, like, the comedy was. And that God just didn't love me. Like, I just felt unseen, totally unseen by God, completely. And when you are feeling that way, when you feel unseen by your parents, by loved ones, and alone, you turn to other things to really try and find comfort, right, and the wrong things. Whether that is relationships or drugs or alcohol or sex or shopping, whatever it could be, it typically is not a good situation that you are seen in or put in, because you are trying to fulfill a void as a young adult because you don't feel love, so you try to seek it out in other people and other things. And that's truly what I did. I tried to seek things out, and we'll go further in all of this and my testimony for sure. There is just a lot to unpack here. And so, I truly felt absolutely disconnected from God. Like, he just didn't love me. And I would cry and yell and scream and curse, why to God, why are you doing this to me? Why doesn't anybody love me? Why don't you love me? It was a really hard and difficult and lonely time. And it put me into this, I put a wall up, and then I would try to protect myself. Usually the way my attitude was and my personality is that I was really good at jokes and passive aggressive behavior towards people who were in my life. And I lost a lot of friends that way, because I would feel like in order for me to protect myself, I would have to make jokes that ultimately might hurt somebody else. And that doesn't normally go well, right, with people. They really don't, like that. I was bitter a lot, self-loathing a lot. I had no joy. I had no laughter. I felt like I had no fun. I felt like I just was totally lost. That's truly how I felt. And this continued to go on in my life for 20 years, for sure, because I didn't come to Christ until I was 44 years old. I'm 45 today. Not today, today's not my birthday, but I'm 45 now. And it wasn't until last year that I realized that God was always there for me. I just was not listening. And He's there for you. And that's what I feel like, that my purpose now today is to encourage people that if you feel like you are totally broken, you are too broken for God, you are too broken to be saved, you're too broken for God to love you, that He doesn't love you, then I'm here to tell you today that that is simply not true. That is what the enemy wants you to think. The enemy wants you to think that you are not loved. And he does a really good job separating you from God. And He separated me from God for a really, really long time. Until that day that I was saved. So if you want to continue listening to this story and dive deeper into my testimony, if this resonates with you where you feel like, yeah, you know what? That is exactly how I feel, then stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and join the community of the Rock and Honey Collective, because you are not alone. I thought that I was alone my entire life, but I do realize now that God is with you, God loves you, and He just wants you to be closer to Him. So with love and faith, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.